J Leman, All-American linebacker, joining us, talking about a 4-1 football team. Jay, I know you and I thought they could win at a vulnerable Wisconsin team, but that was emphatically dominant, so much so that Paul Chryst was fired after. And we'll get to that later, but
yeah,
just the most impressive part of that win for you was what?
I think the way Illinois won, I think you could go back to 2019 and say, when they beat Wisconsin, it was maybe a little fluky based off of turnovers. I think if you go back to the Tim Beckman era when they beat Cincinnati, quarterback gets hurt. I've been going through like the great wins of the last 10 or 12 years, and I just think so dominant up front. I knew Illinois defense was good up front. I didn't know how good against the run they would be. They passed that with spades. And then the ability to stick with the run game. This felt like a game where a team's able to hang with the team for a half and then it's done. And that's what happened in the third quarter. That's what good football teams do. I said this somewhere else last week. I said, if you look at the conference, the Big Ten West, and you had white jerseys on everybody or black jerseys on everybody, and you took the jerseys off and you just looked at the film and you didn't judge teams in the past of what they've done the last 5 years or what they did last year, what Iowa's done. Illinois football is playing the best out of anybody in the Big Ten West. Defensively for sure. And offensively, the last week or two has really made strides.
I thought they proved as much in this game, Jay, and I agree with you. Michigan State, Wisconsin a couple years ago, there's a little bit of flukiness involved. Sure. So could they sustain? That was the question. I have no doubt that they can sustain what they're doing because it's sustainable. You're winning in the trenches.
Sure.
You're starting to take care of the ball. But let's start with that number one scoring defense in the country, limiting Braylon Allen to 8 carries on 2 yards. Ches Malusiu, I think, can start for a lot of Big Ten teams, 16 yards, 7 carries. You put in the quarterback sacks, they had 2 rushing yards. Jay.
Yeah.
How are they able to do that? I mean, the defensive front, it's one of the best in the Big Ten, right?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. It's very rare too to see. We have a 5-man front on a high percentage of our downs. That's kind of rare to see. I mean, it is a true 3-4. They count Akis and Coleman as outside backers, but they keep Calvin Avery in there a lot, right? As a true nose, and have Newton along with Randolph. And let me just tell you this, if you play man-to-man coverage against a halfway decent quarterback, which Graham Mertz is, despite whatever people say, you're going to give up some pass plays. It's just the bottom line. You're going to give up plays. We heard Brett Bielema say it. They hit Garindo early with a great pitch and great catch. I mean, so kind of
Mertz is frustrating, right? Because he'll make throws. They're like, oh, okay. And then
they're going to get some plays, right? You gave up, I think, 200 yards passing, right? But at the same time, it's just not very consistent. This offensively, they look like Illinois a little bit last year against against Wisconsin, right? Where they tried to it almost threw them off. We can't run the football. We're not going to try that much. Let's throw the football. We had some success. They got away from their identity a bit. And quite honestly, there is no such thing as a bad Wisconsin offensive line. Is this as dominant as years past? It's not, but it's definitely average to above average when you look across the Big Ten West for sure. And when it came to the run game, I saw Keith, I saw Calvin, I saw Johnny, I saw some of the backers. They always say play with extension, but they don't stick to blocks. No Velcro on these guys, man. They get off blocks, I mean fast. And dude, the pressure is real. Listen, Graham Mertz, there's a reasons quarterbacks have been a lot worse, whether it's Brennan Armstrong or anybody we're playing against or Graham Mertz in the third and fourth quarter. Dude, it gets tiresome to keep on getting hit, to be under duress, getting banged up, and they're bringing tons of pressure and trust in the back end with a lot of faith, which they've done a good job on that. The back end has. But I would think first it starts with stopping the run. You win first and second down. A lot of bad penalties by Wisconsin as well. And then also you bring pressure on these downs and you see sacks from multiple people, right? I saw Randolph get a sack. Newton had some pressures. I think D'Arcangelo had a sack. T-Raw, is it T-Raw or T-Raw? T-Raw had a sack, Edwards. And so you see it from multiple people, which means it's not just a great athlete, a lot of it schematically as well.
Jay, like I don't mean to rag on anybody, but you just see how much scheme and coaching matters, right? Like just the whole philosophy of this defense is so different than what Lovie Smith did. Can you explain like why that has unlocked all these guys?
So I guess the most simple and maybe most brutal explanation is that Ryan Walters is a better defensive coach, at least at the college level. I think we can agree on that. I mean, I think Lovie Smith has proven at the NFL and whatnot, but at the college level, as far as teaching and implementing a game plan and skills, there's no question he's done a phenomenal job. Number two, the players have gotten older. Some of those players, admittedly, probably played too early in their career, and now they're reaching mature status. But let's get to the schemes. And I think it's about putting players in position to be excellent, right? And I think they have done a phenomenal job at putting guys where they will thrive at. You know, what I love is that Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, they play what you would call a 4-eye, which is basically inside shade a lot of times of that tackle. And in another defense, they might be a nose tackle or a 3 technique. But what I love about a 4-eye, which is what, you know, like a guy like J.J. Watt plays in the NFL, Aaron Donald plays that a lot as well, is it's these guys that are big, but have tremendous feet and motor. And so I feel like it's put Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph in a great space to be great at the 4-eye position, number one, okay? Calvin Avery would really struggle at a 4-eye, but he's dominant as a nose tackle when you say, hey, you got one job, and that is to blow up the center and get penetration. And he does that, right? And then you start to throw in Gabe Akis, Seth Coleman. Hey, we got to have you get some pressures. You're putting them in the right position. I think the biggest difference I see, though, is on the back end. I did not realize how good, guys, they do a tremendous job of disguising. But when it comes down to it after the ball is, so there's pre-snap and there's post-snap. Pre-snap, they do a lot of disguising. But when it comes down to it, largely it's man-to-man or some kind of pressure, right? Or sometimes they slough off into cover 3, which looks like man-to-man. Pre-snap. The technique that they play with is I'm telling you right now, scouts are taking notice. I'm taking notice. We really have tremendous technique. You look at Devin Witherspoon, unbelievable technique on pass breaks. Quan Martin, rarely out of position, makes the tackle in space. I've been really impressed with Taz Nicholson. Yeah. I mean, I think he's probably, we would say, the 4th best out of the DBs, but he certainly hasn't played like the last 2 or 3 weeks. You know, I think he's made plays. He's physical. He's a ball hawk. And, you know, although sometimes Sydney might not have the stat line, his versatility of what he can do is kind of like a Troy. Not only does he just look like it looks like a Troy Polamalu, but he does act like that because he's able to be a run stuffer. So I think the technique, number one, putting guys where they need to be at, right? And at the end of the day, let's be honest, everything works better when the guys up front are getting pressure and stopping the run. And we've seen it work synergistically.
Jay, I think Illinois would be lucky to get another year of Keith Randolph and Johnny Newton with the way they're playing, but it is so fun to watch Calvin Avery. Sure. Just the light goes on. He got an extra year and he's making the most of it. What does he mean between those two who are playing at a ridiculous level? But what has Calvin meant is kind of the linchpin of that?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's really what we call it combo blocks in the run game, where, you know, hey, the center and guard can get a hand to help out on, you know, maybe the center, the nose tackle, but then they combo up onto Johnny Newton, or they a double team, a combination block up onto Keith Randolph. And the thing is you can't block Calvin Avery with one guy. Like I've seen people try to block Calvin Avery with one dude. When he decides to go, which has been, that was really the question the first 3 or 4 years. I have not seen him loaf this year, right? I've seen his motor on the entire time. And when he goes, he cannot be blocked at the point of attack. He might not make the play, okay? But he's going to be very disruptive. And whenever you have somebody that's very disruptive that caves the center of an offensive line, one, the pocket collapses on the passes. But two, I'm not able to come up and help, and pass off Johnny Newton or Keith Randolph to another guy. I saw one time where they tried to have Eschenbach, I believe, block Newton on a run play, and Newton threw him like a rag doll. And it was this was a down block by Eschenbach, right? So it should be an easy block for an offensive guy. Newton saw it, basically threw him with one hand and made the play, right? I mean, these are just plays that you're like, okay, yeah, it's a 0-yard gain, but why is it a 0-yard gain? And because they're all working in tandem, and a big part of that is Calvin Avery. And I think that's why Ryan Walters, one of the reasons at least, has been able to say, I can put 5 down because I got Calvin Avery in there and he gobbles up a ton. And here's the thing about a nose. A nose is often taken out on pass downs because they are not great pass rushers historically. They are great run stuffers. But what I've seen with Calvin Avery, he gets so much push, he's able to collapse the pocket. Now, a center is known to try to keep the pocket firm by not giving much ground, and then tackles give ground, right? But he's collapsed the pocket, which has made the quarterback sidestep right into Newton or Mertz or Newton or Randolph.
Yeah, it's almost like he's an offensive lineman pushing the center.
Sure.
Back
Yeah, no, totally a grinder, right? I mean, and he's been really impressive. And a big shout out to Terrence Jameson. I think he's done a tremendous job. I know this is probably a big game for a lot of these coaches, right? I mean, Aaron Henry coached at Wisconsin, played at Wisconsin. I played against Coach Henry, the DB coach, and also Terrence Jameson played at Wisconsin, was a coach there, and I think he's done a tremendous job technique-wise. And I don't want that to be, not stated.
Jay, let's flip to the offensive side of the football. You mentioned one thing that really stuck out to me, which is they kept giving it to Chase Brown, right? They didn't give up on it. Tony Peterson just kind of game plan out the window. Let's throw it 38 times last year. Didn't work out. We see how that works out in the end as Chase gets the big one. But also they were 5 for 5 in the red zone. You could probably say 7 for 7 because they had to get 3 times on the one drive. But what stood out for you offensively to be able to score 34 on Wisconsin, which is the most in 20 years that Illinois had?
First off, I don't think any offense clicks without the offensive line. So I think they did a tremendous job. Remember, this was coming into the year, was considered a patchwork offensive line with some JUCO transfers that were highly regarded, but largely unproven at the Power 5 level, obviously. I think I cannot say enough about Tommy DeVito. Certainly didn't have any touchdown passes, and understand had one called back with the chase and whatnot. And Tip Ryman could have been, that could have been one. Maybe that wasn't him throwing the football, but what I'm saying is he was so poised, right? It reminded me of the Wisconsin quarterbacks that I played against, right? Didn't blow you away. The word is efficient, right? They always lead the league in passing efficiency, right?
He reminds me of Sean Clifford. He might have more arm talent, but Sean's not this guy that people are going to NFL prospect, but he's a dang good college quarterback. And then Tommy just looks like a dang good college quarterback.
And Sean Clifford's good enough that Will Levis wasn't able to beat him out, right? Will Levis had to transfer to Kentucky, right? So, I really give Tommy a lot of credit because I think he's what we were really missing last year, the ability to pick up some first downs through the air to Isaiah when you need it, or to Pat Bryant, or even Hightower had some really good. That first ball to Hightower was clean. Maybe one of the best balls we've seen as far as from Tommy DeVito. So he was in sync and his leadership. But what I like is they stuck with the run game. I feel like we have Brett Bielema of Wisconsin, but he has had the education of, hey, I need a little more spread tendency. It's not just ground and pound. It's a little bit more modernized version. So they stuck with the run. He knew something was going to pop, and Chase popped it, right? Which he did. Made a guy miss right in the hole. The safety was there to make a play. Totally missed it. And then what I love is, let's talk about Barry Lunney. The RPO banged them a couple times, right? On the slant route. getting Isaiah open for third downs, right? Some creative plays when we needed it. I give him a lot of credit. I mean, 34 points against a Wisconsin defense. I know they've lost a lot to graduation, okay? But I tell you what, very good game plan. We've been upset about turnovers. We've been upset about red zone. Those were not an issue, right? And so, Chase is one of those guys where if you feed him enough, it's going to happen, right? I don't think we have another running back on the roster right now that's like that. Maybe Josh McCray when healthy, but you have to feed Chase, and they did a good job getting his touches, even when it didn't work right away.
Yeah, I thought some of the plays that really stood out, the fourth down whip route to Isaiah Williams was
Sure.
a beauty for him. Near the goal line on a third down, they had 4 wide receivers set, and Tommy DeVito took the draw. I don't know if he had the option to pass if the number said it, but and then Tommy just prolonging some plays, finding Bryant on one, and then finding Isaiah Williams for a third down conversion early in the game on a scramble, and then the back shoulder throw. So yeah, there were some really big first downs. Like we talk about the touchdown plays all the time, but those first
Sure.
down drive extending plays are just massive.
Well, we said that going into the year is that what was Tommy DeVito bring? We thought it'd be 3 to 5 more first downs, and those happen at critical times. And I think what's, in the past without a defense like Illinois has now, the offense sputters maybe the first quarter and a half. We would be down 21-0, right? And so with this defense, there's never any panic, right? They're going to listen, if you play the way they don't play bend but don't break. We hear that term a lot. They really don't play that style at all, right? It's like nothing or maybe something, they're going to give up some plays, but they are not a bend but don't break defense. They're highly aggressive. They're highly challenging. They take on the personality of Ryan Walters, and we're going to give up some plays. And I think they've realized that, and they've coached the guys, listen, you're going to give up some plays in this. Let's keep going. And really just took the soul of Wisconsin. I mean, it's hard to state what that means when Wisconsin has been what they've been the last 2 or 3 decades in the Big Ten.
Jay, the players said they expected to win, but you were a part of a team in 2006 that struggled to win those games. Then in 2007, you find a way to win.
Sure.
But what is a win like that? Dominant at Wisconsin, first time in 20 years. I know you expect to win going in there. You can say that, but to actually get it, how does that change for the players in that locker room?
I think it is a total mental shift for these guys. I mean, there's always talk in summer workouts, winter workouts. We're going to be this. We're going to be better. We expect to win. Of course, you're not going to go there and say we don't expect to win, right? But I think when you actually go do it on national TV at somebody's house who's, been the historical bully in the Big Ten West over the last decade, and you do it the way that you did it, and you realize, wow, I'm not that far away. I think that's the thing. You kind of think, oh, we'll get there someday. I'm telling you right now, if I'm Illinois, there's no reason I don't belong in the Big Ten West Championship, right? If everybody's got a loss, I've got Michigan and Michigan State. Even if I lose to Michigan but win out, I can be in that Big Ten West Championship, right? And so you're thinking that, number one. So it's shifting. I think number two is it's a very difficult time, and this reminds me a lot of we had just beaten Penn State, we had just beaten Wisconsin, and then we got to go to Iowa, And
It still eats at you, doesn't it?
Still eats at me, And Iowa, I believe at that time was that year 3-3. They were not great, and ended up losing that game, 10-6. Just a game where nothing really works well. I mean, we played okay defensively, but we let them chew up a lot of clock, and I think that's what I worry when I see Iowa on the schedule, because what are they, 3-2 and have looked bad offensively, but they're going to be better than we expect them to be. And I do think it's going to be the biggest challenge for our offense that they've had. And so that's the thing. not committing turnovers, and special teams. But I know I'm getting into the next game.
Yeah, but Jay, I was going to ask you, now they're going to start getting some love, right? Like now get some national love, get some votes, receiving votes in the polls. What's the key in that locker room with the coaching staff to maintain this week after week? Like, that's the hard part here. It's like last year we saw them win some games, then the next week, lose to Rutgers,
Right.
which is hard. And then how do you find that consistency as a program?
Yeah. So just thinking of the schedule last year. So on October 9th, they got beat by Wisconsin 24-0, right? And then they go and beat Penn State. Then they lose to Rutgers. Then they beat Minnesota, lose to Iowa, and then dominate Northwestern, right? And so it went back and forth and hemmed and hawed, right? And I think breakthrough win is consistent in it is a total of these 3 games scheduled, circled on their schedule for a while. I mean, you look at it, you got Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, all recruit in our backyard. Those guys historically, at least Iowa, Wisconsin, have been better than us, Minnesota better than us recently. And I think they know what's on these 3 games. I think they're going to be ready. But I think what gives me confidence is when you can play stifling defense and run the football, you have a chance in every game, even if other things don't work. And that's what gives me confidence moving into this game against Iowa.
All right, Jay. Well, now you get Iowa here, a chance for Illinois to get to 5-1, probably get a ranking if you beat Iowa here at home. And I hate this term, but kind of maybe control your destiny the rest of the way in the Big Ten West. So what do you think are the keys to Illinois getting that victory and getting another one?
Well, I think a huge deal is that Illinois is at home. Kinnick's a very tough place to play, number one. And I think Illinois being at home, a night game, I think there's going to be a good fan output for it, hopefully. And I'm excited about that. Number 2 is turnovers. Nobody's better at intercepting the football than the Hawkeyes over the last half decade or so. And Phil Parker prides himself on that. I wouldn't be surprised if Tommy DeVito throws 1 or 2, maybe a tip pass, maybe something else. Can the Illinois defense respond after that and the Illinois offense respond? Listen, like a great offense, this defense is going to make plays, right? And then special teams. It was the kickoff return last year against Iowa that really broke an omen. Illinois played them even. Remember, I don't think Brett Bielema was at that Iowa game. I don't think he would think he was sick with COVID. And unfortunately, it was the special teams that made a difference. And with Caleb Griffin being banged up a little bit, we saw that kind of be an issue against Wisconsin. That was their best offensive weapon, really, was some of their kickoff returns. And so we got to be good in those facets.
Well, Jay, I don't think either of us thought Paul Chryst would get fired even after the loss like that quickly. I thought he was got to be on the hot seat for a little bit, but Wisconsin makes a quick move here. Jim Leonard, who some people think could be the head coach after this, it seems to be getting a trial run. But what did you make of Wisconsin making this move? It feels like pretty urgent for a program that has struggled a little bit more than usual here recently and is losing ground in the conference. But a program that seems to be so stable making this move was kind of shocking.
I was shocked by this. I mean, they were 4-3 in the COVID year. That was kind of a wash year for everybody, right? 9-4 last year with a bowl win. Paul Chryst has won every bowl except the 2019 Rose Bowl, where he lost in the last second to Oregon. Remember, he won the Cotton Bowl in 2016, where they beat Western Michigan, beat Miami in the Orange Bowl in 2017. I mean, they've been to some legit bowl games, right? 2016, 2017, Rose Bowl 2019. Seemed to be a rotate between Capital One and Outback if they're not in those, right? I mean, that's just kind of what Wisconsin is. And so I thought, he was born and raised in Madison, played there, long-time assistant there. I did not see it coming at all. But I think they have 2 things. One is just become way more popular to fire your coach earlier than later in college football. I don't know if that's to get a jump on stuff or what, but I do believe they think they have a diamond in Jim Leonard. I really think they didn't want Jim to get away and have a chance to kind of give a trial run. Whether he gets the job, I'm not sure. I think the other one that makes sense is Lance Leipold. I mean, obviously the Wisconsin Whitewater connection there, won a ton of games at the D3 level and has won at every level he's been at, now 5-0 with Kansas. I think, though, there could be a couple people fighting for Leipold, whether it be Colorado or Nebraska or, Wisconsin. So all of those things combined, I was really surprised, but I think it is a unbelievable opportunity. We look at how shaky the Big Ten West is, right? I mean, Frost is gone. Okay. We have Chryst now gone. But Pat Fitzgerald in Northwestern, I'm not saying Pat Fitzgerald is gone. I think he's got more than a year or two of maybe subpar football, just of what he's done there. But they're not playing at the same level they played at. That is obvious to see. Okay. And so something needs to change. And so Northwestern losing ground, at least in the win-loss column. I know they've had some recruiting wins and whatnot. PJ looks to be on stable ground. Brown looks to be on stable ground. But if there's a team with the most momentum right now, it's got to be Illinois. When you look at the Big Ten West and how fast stuff can change. And so I think it's a critical time when you look at what Illinois is doing for them to take ground in the conference.
It's a great opportunity, especially as long as division play is here, which might not be that much longer, but you might have a chance here. Jay, before I let you go, I mean, two big jobs in this conference, not Michigan, Ohio State, but two big jobs in Wisconsin, Nebraska. Like, if you're Lance Leipold, which one is more appealing? Like, what do you think is the better job?
I think for Lance, I think, depends how important, home base is for him with what he did in Wisconsin. That might be more appealing to him based on, he's an older coach for being an up and coming coach. I mean, I think he's in his 50s at least, and so I think that seems more appealing. I know that Nebraska seems to be a little bit more committed to the cutting edge of, hey, we're going to do whatever it takes to be the best and to get back to where it's at, whether it's going to, do this with NIL or we're going to pay coaches this or whatever. So I can see both of those. And I will say this, if Illinois gets to 9 wins this year, which I do think is possible, Brett Bielema could be a candidate for either job. Now, would they ever bring him back to Wisconsin? Doubtful, right? But if I'm Nebraska, it's worth a chat from where Illinois was over the last 2 years. Now, I don't want that to happen. And I'm sure if he gets 9 wins, Josh Whitman's going to lock him up for an extension. So Brett doesn't make no signs of that. But I'm just saying, when you win games, that's what happens. So just some food for thought for Illinois fans,
Yeah, and how about this? I mean, Colorado's open. Of course, Ryan Walters can be mentioned for that.
Sure.
Jay. That's a good sign when other people want your coaches, because the guy who was the last Illinois assistant to become a head coach. Right.
Yeah. Was it Mike Loxley, right?
A long time ago, Jay.
A long time ago. And, what's interesting about Loxley was, although we had some good offenses, certainly did that, it was largely for the recruiting aspect that he did. And I think with Ryan Walters, although they've got good players, people really think he is a premier coach. And I know he's at least going to get an interview for Colorado, whether he needs to have a stop at a Mountain West job beforehand or a MAC job beforehand. I guess that's a decision for former Illinois guy Rick George to make. But there was a time when everybody wanted Rick George to be our AD and not Josh Whitman. So it's amazing how stuff turns out over time. Let's just say that.
J Leman, you're the goods, man. Appreciate it as always. We'll talk next week.
You got it.